Last Monday night I was sitting outside a tavern in the Palazzo Pubblico, occasionally glancing at the San Marino Parliament, one of the smallest parliaments I've ever seen, or else looking straight ahead at the snow-topped Apennine Mountains. San Marino sits on Mount Titano, one of the highest of those mountains. And I was pleased as I sat there that I'd knocked another item off my bucket list, to visit one of the 5 smallest countries in the world. In actual fact, I'd knocked 2 items, because I also went to Parma to see Ulster playing Zebra, and Ulster won 28-14. Dusk was closing in when we heard the voices of what might have been angels, but in reality were the voices of Augustinian nuns in the darkness processing up the hill towards the Basilica in San Marino. It was a passion play, and in the midst was a young man in the role of Jesus, carrying what looked like the heaviest of crosses. I don't think he was just acting. I think it was genuinely an extremely heavy cross that he was carrying. Isabel and myself decided we would follow the procession to the Basilica. At first, when I saw this, I thought to myself, oh look, a passion play. I've never seen one of these before. And I was deeply excited and indeed entertained by the whole event. But then in a while, I became deeply moved, and in particular at the performance of the young man in the role of Jesus. He had really committed himself to the part. In the Basilica, when the Passion Play had ended, and all the people who had played different parts were welcomed up to be commended by the Mother Superior of the Augustinian nuns, each of them came forward and received an applause. The little children, the man who played Simon and carried the cross, the woman who played Mary Magdalene, and Mary, the mother of Jesus. I did turn to Isabel and say, I hope Jesus gets the biggest applause, because I thought he was the best. And fair enough, mind you, it would be very surprising if Jesus didn't get the biggest applause. And he did. After that, as we were leaving the Basilica, a young nun spoke to both of us and asked us where we were from. And we said we were from Northern Ireland, not really we're from Dublin, but we were pretending to be from Northern Ireland. And I said, we're Protestants from Ulster. No, I didn't actually do that. But I said, we're Protestants from Northern Ireland, we're members of the Protestant church. And she was so excited, she went and got the Mother Superior to come up and talk to us. And they were the sweetest and most wonderful of people, and we had a great conversation with them about the celebration of Easter. And it made me think, as I said earlier on in my opening remarks, as a professed Unitarian, I've always had a very rational and logical approach to what we call religion, and how I embrace it, and sometimes more of a philosophical understanding than a deeply religious understanding. But I have to say, I was deeply moved by this Passion Play. Now, over the Easter, I did of course see The Greatest Story Ever Told, that film that's shown every year. And one of the most famous lines from it is near the end when Jesus rises from the dead. John Wayne's voice says, "That man is surely the Son of God." And one of the two characters, of course, appear in that are Judas and Barabbas. And in a way, Judas gets a bad press because he's always portrayed in many ways as just somebody who wanted 30 pieces of silver. But in actual fact, he felt they had been betrayed. This is how I understand the story. They had been betrayed by Jesus because they thought he was going to be the liberator of the Jewish people and would liberate them from the Romans. And the same with Barabbas. Barabbas is often told in many different stories. Barabbas, the name meaning Bar, son, Abbas, of the Father, son of the Father. And it's believed that Barabbas' first name equally may have been Jesus. And he was Jesus Barabbas, and you had Jesus of Nazareth. And Barabbas equally is described sometimes as a criminal, a thief. And yet, it's often told that that's not what he was. He was equally a revolutionary, a radical, who wanted to overthrow the Roman Empire and free the Jewish people. In a way, they were people who thought Jesus was going to deliver them into freedom. And I've often thought of that regarding myself, because I was always a keen advocate of what we call the social gospels, calling on us to respond to the poverty we meet in our own environment, and also social action on numerous other different issues, which I've done most of my life. And the problem with that is we don't always agree on what that issue should be, and we differ dramatically on how we see the social gospels should be played out. But that simple passion play in a tiny country reminded me that essentially the sacrifice of Jesus is actually about personal salvation. It's not always about saving the world. You can do that if you like as well. But saving yourself and revealing yourself to God and gaining freedom in the light of our Lord, accepting that light into your life. It's about you on a personal basis. Yes, there is truth in responding to the social gospel. But we should remember that Jesus walked amongst us for the poor in spirit, somewhat encapsulated in the scriptural words, "What does it benefit a man to gain the world but lose his soul?" So you might save the world but lose your own soul. That Jesus cared for those who may possess wealth. Sometimes we're not good at accepting that. Jesus did not discriminate between the poor and the wealthy. Because if they were broken in spirit, they were equally welcomed into his fold. The poor in spirit is contained in the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:3. Now, what did Jesus mean? Was he suggesting we should be humble in our spirits? If you put the word humble in place of the word poor, you do get a sense of meaning.